So we're here to talk about NumFOCUS and about empowering scientists and helping humanity, and like why we're here, why we do what we do. I'm going to let Leah introduce herself.
I'm Leah Silen. I'm the executive director of NumFOCUS. Have been with NumFOCUS since the beginning in early 2012. So my background is in the nonprofit sector, dealing with operations, community building, some fundraising and PR in there too. And yeah, super excited about the work we're doing, and hopefully when you leave today, you'll be able to have a little bit more information. Yeah. Oh, you have yours.
Yeah, so I'm the president of the board. I have several other jobs, but today I'm president of the board at NumFOCUS. I started out in life as a computational mathematician. I realize that term is no longer used, but I will remain true to the archaic terms before data science existed. And I guess my kind of role is like open source technologies and talking more about the vision and how to interact with scientists and so on and so forth. So why are we here? Well, I'm here to help give some motivational vision of who we are, why we do what we do, and maybe that'll rub off on other folks and they can tell others why we do what we do and so forth. Leah's here to tell us how sausage is made. Communities don't just build themselves. And I hope that you're here to give us input and to encourage us to help solve some of your needs or help solve things that we can work together on and so on and so forth. So with that, I'll start the my part. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of my experiences on different projects. And being a mathematician, it's always hard to tell people what you actually do. It's more like, well, I can tell you a whole bunch of things that I've done, but like what I actually do requires an advanced degree to really start to understand. So I'll tell you a little bit about some of the projects that really inspired me to be very focused on what NumFOCUS does. So Hurricane Sandy happened a few blocks from here. I know, I was there, I saw it come in. And one of the worst storms to hit in the US ever, on recorded history at least. And to get where we get to today, where if this sort of storm hit Indonesia like it did previously, it killed many, many people, right? And if it hit us maybe even 30 years ago, it would have done probably as much damage to the US as the Indonesian tsunamis did, just because there requires a lot of preparation to understand when the hurricane's coming, when it's going to be here, who's it's going to harm. And I think most people don't really even know that, like, actually the hurricanes, when the storm hits, is like, that's not really the hard part. The wind is not the thing that you care about. It's actually the storm surge and who has to evacuate. And as our society like builds, we're all building on the coast, and like, how do we do that in a safe way? And so Hurricane Sandy could have been much, much worse than it was. It was devastating. But ever since the 60s, we've been putting IoT devices in the ocean that give us a lot of information about the waves coming in and how we actually how we can respond to that very quickly. Now that turns into data feeds that feed into the ocean. Anybody can go to the NOAA website and find these and get a nice little feed of them. They even have matplotlib plots on them to show you how over time they're moving. So everywhere we look, there's our technology kind of built into this. Now from that, we can use the Euler equations, for example, or shallow water equations to understand where that's going to hit. And of course, that requires large computers for this particular problem to map over all the possibilities where Hurricane Sandy could have gone. Last night I was talking with several people about Hurricane Harvey, about where it's going to be, and the same researchers doing the same thing over and over, working with emergency responders and understanding how to interact with the science about the hurricane and storm surge. So it was a project I got to work on. It was a lot of fun. Then there's another project I'd like to highlight, which was human trafficking. So human trafficking is a problem that's turned into it's a $9 billion industry currently by some estimations. And it's all done largely on the internet these days. The internet's done a lot of really great things, but it's also helped us some other things that aren't so great. But helping, so I had an opportunity to help the Department of Justice build some tools to find people, find victims, and put people behind bars who are causing these victims so much harm. And so now we see pretty much every city in America, you can see headlines like this, where the FBI is catching criminals who are trafficking sometimes small children like this one, sometimes large groups of women, and sometimes even forced labor. I think there was a case in Louisiana not too long ago of a large number of men who were forced labor and so on and so forth. And the same sort of idea comes through here. These folks are using the internet, and they're using open data and open platforms in order to advertise their particular wares. And income scientists who already know how to handle open data, in this case we're extracting information from the internet or from web pages, from ads or communications and whatnot. But we're using open tools again to work with the scientific community to understand how these different humans are affected and so on. Use tools like scikit-learn and others that give an excellent interface, and anybody can come in and build information retrieval tools that scientists have kind of elaborated on and learned about. And once again, it's usually on massive machines, which has been commoditized and very cheap. In this case, it's a data machine, not necessarily a computational machine, but I won't go into all the intricacies of those details. Once again, everywhere we look, touching humanity, scientists helping emergency responders, helping normal people be better in their lives and help humanity. And we haven't stopped there. Everywhere we look, we see projects that come out of the NumFOCUS set of the NumFOCUS sponsored projects. The Philae lander, I remember my colleague had to rush off from a meeting because the thermal detection device was using NumPy, and he had to go fix some issues on the optimization because all of a sudden it became a very big deal to conserve power on this little device out in the middle of space. To this kind of red image, which was a code that I helped build, was used by doctors in Norway, I believe, to find aneurysms from the Circle of Willis, which is this nice little thing. You learn a lot about how blood flows in the back of your head. Well, that little ring right there is an excellent case of fluid dynamics being very important for your life, and knowing which one of those bulbs to cut can save your life. To important things like Higgs boson, where the analysis was using a lot of the Python ecosystem, the Python tools. I think I was even drug in once to a set of a geo computing crew that wanted to know when do the glaciers, what are the pinning points, where does the glacier break off, and so on and so forth. And in every one of these cases, like it's cases where math and science are touching humanity and producing us in much farther than what we are, and helping us get over some of our barriers of communication, our barriers of innovation and working together. And so now I ask this kind of to this crowd, probably I don't need to ask this too much, but where is the software project in all this? I mean, they talked a little bit this morning about how to focus on the project. Now, anytime you get two people together to talk about something, you actually have a project that people communicate and produce things for other people to use. And I always like the idiom of R2D2 and C3PO, who are these like tiny characters in this really massive kind of global, galactic domination and stopping the empire and all this sort of thing. And really, I mean, like, if those two guys were in the movie, like, nothing would have worked. Like, some people like go to MacGyver. I'm like, no, like, these two little robots, like, I mean, they took down whole empires that were causing oppression, right? And in many ways, we're the same breed. Like, software projects were there. There go the heroes. Let the emergency responders, let the police department, let the scientists who are getting finding massive discoveries that's going to lead us to the next phase of humanity. They're there taking off, but they need us to prop them up and understand what they're doing. And so that kind of metaphor kind of comes to me, it kind of raffles a little bit just because sometimes the software projects aren't mentioned. And so here's like what I think in some of the discoveries or whatnot. And so here's kind of what is the kind of a traditional pipeline of innovation as the like DARPA might say, or a lot of innovation folks would kind of come. It's like, this is the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to have scientific discovery, it's supposed to turn into an archival paper. And then you have some leader who comes in, a technical innovator, right, who takes over, the Steve Jobs person, somebody who knows that this is the right way by reading papers or finding the discoveries, and they get engineered, have some engineered code that then gets integrated to everyone and then solves the human problem. And my main problem with all these pipelines and all these discussions about how innovation works is that the scientist and the human are so far apart, they never touch each other. They never know what's actually the real problems are. And I think that there's a lot of miscommunication and through this pipeline, and it happens with things as simple as patents and software licenses and who can use this code and what language and so on and so forth, right? I mean, who cares if you're talking about Python or R when you have a missing child to find, right? And so I think a lot of like this kind of view of innovation causes friction that we don't really need in our community. And so I believe in solving open problems and creating an open ecosystem that's a little bit holistic. Like our artifacts, our engineered code, our archival papers, they still are very important. They produce a foundation to what we do. But I prefer, maybe like I think project management these days talks about putting your users and your engineers together, the scientists to the humans, the scientists to the technical innovators, and having a cohesive discussion. And you really can't do that without an open ecosystem, an open way to communicate and talk and have those discussions. And to be honest, you can't solve business problems that way either. So I understand there are some people who do business, and I every once in a while work for the enterprise. And so the same thing exists in the enterprise. If we want to be able to solve the world's problems with the business leaders of today, get the scientists and the technical innovators and the engineers talking together on the same page. And that's my vision of why I work at NumFOCUS and why we build this ecosystem. And so I'd like to invite Leah come back, and she'll talk a little bit more about what it takes to build that ecosystem and why we go after what we do, I guess. So. Just click, just tap.
Okay, I'm gonna turn this back on. I'm used to talking with my hands, so it'll be a little hard with this mic. We'll see how this goes. Okay, so why NumFOCUS? To answer that question, I think it's easiest to go back to the founding board members of NumFOCUS and what was their goal in creating this organization. They saw a need, and they decided there needed to be an organization to fill that need, and that was support for open source scientific computing projects. They happened to be the authors of some pretty important projects at the time that were gaining popularity, and their usage was increasing rapidly, not only in academia, but also among industry. So these were NumPy, and IPython, and AstroPy, and Matplotlib, SciPy. So they were all Python, but from the very beginning, it was never meant that NumFOCUS would be exclusive to Python, only Python projects. So they saw this need that had to, someone needed to support these open source projects, and they felt like creating a nonprofit to be able to do this was the way that we were going to see if this need could be fulfilled. So if we talk about why NumFOCUS and we look at the needs of the projects and supporting them, we talk about funding. Projects need funding. Without funding, I think it was mentioned in a keynote today that funding is the way to be able to see the realization of some ideas. So we can't just have a project out there and someone can be contributing on the code, but that funding is needed for the project to be able to excel and to grow. Stability. NumFOCUS provides a central hub for projects that it creates that support on a very stable basis. Project contributors can change. They may be able to, they may come and go. There's reasons Brett mentioned this morning about burnout. So all those things can happen. So NumFOCUS is able to provide a very stable place for projects to be able to call home. Projects need independence. NumFOCUS functions as a neutral, unbiased, and independent organization. Logistical support is another need of projects. NumFOCUS takes the administrative, the financial admin and responsibilities, as well as the legal responsibilities and services that side entails, out of the hands of the open source scientific computing projects, as far as taking it out of the contributors' hands, and allows NumFOCUS to be able to take on those duties. So how do we meet these project needs? Fiscal and legal services, we talked about this a little bit. Sustainability. Sustainability has been talked about. I think I started counting the keynotes that mentioned sustainability, and it was almost every one of them mentioned sustainability in one way or another. So engaging with the projects, it's very important to engage and understand the needs of the projects. It's very hard to go after funding and to know how you're going to support a project if you don't fully understand those needs and how those needs can be met. Community. Community is, NumFOCUS focuses a lot on community. How can we support the community, both providing a community for projects to engage with each other, but also strengthening the broader community and providing opportunities for education and outreach. So fiscal and legal services. What happens when a project receives corporate funding? Projects that come under NumFOCUS's fiscal sponsorship program are, that kind of fills that need, takes care of that process in a way that from the very first time a grant is given to a project, or a project is seeking corporate funding and a donation, there's even talk or discussions of a donation. The first thing that's going to happen is, who are we going to give this money to? We can't just write an individual a check. IPython was the first fiscally sponsored program of NumFOCUS, and their project was talking to Microsoft and had an opportunity for a grant to come in. But there was no, Microsoft had a few issues with just writing Fernando a check for that money. Legally, there needed to be an organization for that money to land into that would guarantee that those funds would be spent for the public good, and that could they could trust with allocating that money, and as well as reporting the funding also. The other thing that happens as far as the fiscal and legal services are providing help, connecting projects to attorneys that can help with trademark ownership, registering trademarks, drafting contracts, signing legal agreements, filling out supplier and vendor forms, could go on and on. If we look at fiscal sponsorship in general, just kind of breaking this down, it seems like a long list, but this doesn't even scratch the surface of what we do for projects under the fiscal sponsorship. So once a project signs a fiscal sponsorship agreement with NumFOCUS, they've met the criteria, the board has approved their application, then we have a meeting with them, an onboarding meeting. There are processes that we want them to understand. This is how the legal and I guess financial administration works. How are they going to work through our accounting system? How does our reporting work? How does that work with licensing? We talked about trademark registration and ownership, contracts and agreements, accounts payable and receivable, handling invoices. There are so many things that come up. Grant administration, grant reporting, taxes. NumFOCUS has to, we have huge tax documents that we have to file every year. We file a 990 as a 501c3 nonprofit, doing that on behalf of all of our projects. We have 22 now, so it's kind of like 22 individual companies, and keeping that accounting straight is quite a task. We have an incredible accounting team and someone on staff that works with our project finance manager who works with the accounting team. And then operational services, providing the technical infrastructure, conference and event planning, consulting on a variety of administrative requests. We get calls and emails from projects all the time asking for help. We are literally the kind of administration services for them, and sometimes it's things we work on, and sometimes it's we have to figure out a solution for the project. Okay, moving to sustainability. How does your project survive? What can we do to make sure these projects remain? As I said, we've heard a lot about sustainability over the couple days of this conference, and sustainability is important. We have to make sure these projects remain here. So NumFOCUS, as part of our sustainability program, which we're launching a formal sustainability program, everything we do is to ensure the sustainability of projects. But we're launching a sustainability project in October, starting with a workshop, and this was funded by Sloan, and we're very grateful to have a projects director on board. So looking at governance documentation, helping projects with that, project management, corporate engagement, creating those relationships between industry and the project. We talked about how important it is to understand the project's needs. Well, it's also really important to help industry understand those needs and to be able to understand that give and take that you heard about this morning is so important. You know, there's a lot of people using these tools. They're making a lot of money from them. They're doing wonderful things, and almost everything we depend upon, you know, whether it's banking or social media or, you know, watching Netflix or seeing the latest things going on with, you know, with NASA and in science, that touching humanity, as Andy talked about. It's important that these projects remain sustainable and that there is a contributor base. So we help ensure that. What are we going to do to make sure that there's a contributor base and there's a diverse contributor base? That's something that we're really working on with our diversity and inclusion program. Trademark and branding. It's important for the projects to be able to communicate who they are. We do a lot to promote the projects, but also helping them to be able to work on their individual branding, letting people know who they are. Community. Why is it important for a project to engage with the community? There's several reasons. Fundraising comes back to fundraising. That's one of them. If people don't know who you are and what you're doing and the applications of your project, they are not going to be interested in giving you money. Yes, they use the tools, but they also, we have to make sure that, you know, on a large scale, people understand what the projects, what they're about. The other thing is it's an ongoing source of project contributors and users. So we want not only the contributor base to grow, but the user base to grow also. And then also the community provides user feedback. It's very important for projects. All right, so on now how can your project interact more with the community? What does NumFOCUS do for increasing this? Educational initiatives. That is probably the one thing that we do that enables projects to, you know, have face-to-face contact with the community. We have several conferences. I'm going to go into a little bit details about our Pi Data conference, but whether it's a Pi Data event or if it's a project-specific event. JupyterCon, you're all here for JupyterCon. There's also a JuliaCon. There's a PhoenixCon. There is, who am I forgetting? Oh, StanCon. Yes, StanCon. There's going to be a CarpentryCon next year. Our projects each are having events, and NumFOCUS supports those events. Social media, that's another way to engage with the community. If we look at just the Twitter accounts of NumFOCUS and Pi Data together, we have over 25,000 Twitter followers. So and then if you add in all of our projects' Twitter accounts, we have quite a few followers. When we're sending out a message, it reaches a lot of people. Our membership, that's another way for projects to engage with the community. We have free community membership. We also have supporting and sustaining membership levels. Part of that membership is receiving a newsletter that NumFOCUS sends out. And that newsletter each month is kind of an update on our projects. Our communication director, Gina, reaches out each month to projects. What are you doing? What do you want to tell the community about? What's coming up? Is there any news you'd like to share? So each month being able to have that interaction. Meetups. Meetups are another way that's a great way for projects to interact with the community, and as well as blogs. Okay, so these educational programs, just kind of running through it, just wanted to put up kind of a bulleted list of conferences. Workshops are another way that one of our main educational programs. NumFOCUS provides small grants for some of our projects to be able to have hackathons or sprints to be able to come together and to work with the core contributors, but also to have workshops, with the community in general. Google Summer of Code. That's a big part of NumFOCUS. We're very involved with Google Summer of Code, and it's a great way to have involved with the community as well as for an educational program. Videos. PyData TV, which has not just our Python projects, but also has, because we want to include Julia and Stan and our OpenSci, and that also has 1.8 million views and 30,000 subscribers. It's a huge international outreach program for us. We made that conscious decision very early on in the PyData events that the talks, the tutorials, if they're not too long, will be recorded, and that those would be put out there for the community to be able to use for education. So we feel really good about, we get a lot of feedback for people that are in very remote areas that are working on becoming data scientists, and their whole knowledge base has come from PyData TV. Meetups, we talked a little bit about this, but this is a great way for the knowledge sharing that started at a conference to be able to continue through the meetups. I think we have over 41,000 members of just in 67 PyData meetups all over the world. And then digital communities. There's project mailing lists. There's lots of ways that community and education can happen through these areas. So this was taken from our annual report last year. And you can go to our website and view our whole annual report if you would like to. But this is just the impact of PyData. We had 9 events in 7 countries with 331 speakers, over 2,800 attendees. We gave out 183 diversity scholarships, and over $250,000 was put back into the projects. So we make it very clear to those attending PyData conferences, your registration is a donation to NumFOCUS. After the conference costs are covered, that money goes right back into paying for projects. Just PyData, money from PyData was able to bring all of our project leads together, pay for their travel, accommodations for our NumFOCUS Summit last year, where they were able to meet face-to-face. So it's very important, and we're very grateful for the support of the community, and hopefully, again, we're providing some educational impact through PyData. So really briefly, I could go on and on. This could be a whole talk itself, talking about NumFOCUS behind the scenes. We have an incredible community that is behind us. I'm one of 6 of our staff. I'm very excited that we have, it's still hard for me to believe we have 6 people on staff. For 3 years, it was just myself. So I'm thrilled to have an incredible, very talented staff. We have our projects director, Christy Kaler, is actually here at the event. Some of you might have had the opportunity to meet her. Gina Helfrich's our communications director and diversity and inclusion program manager. Lynn Brubaker is keeps everything together, handling, working with the accountants and handling the whole financial sector of fiscal sponsorship. We also have an event coordinator, Nancy Wen, who's fantastic and is very busy with all of these events. And then we have an operations coordinator, Mintle, who's a huge help also. And then our board of directors, Lorena's sitting here. She's also on our board, and Andy, board president. We have an incredible board of directors that make sure NumFOCUS is headed in the right direction, make sure I'm doing my job, and make sure that we are indeed supporting these projects, and how else can we do that too, thinking about new initiatives. I won't go through the names of everyone on here. We have an incredible advisory council. Travis Oliphant is sitting back. Travis is on our advisory council and is a former board member. Their counsel and their advice is so important, and we're so grateful to have that. We also have a sustainability advisory board that works with our sustainability program. That also, we have some incredible people on there. Please go to our website and take a few minutes and look over these individuals. We have a diversity and scientific computing committee that is working on our diversity, trying to also help from a grant from the Moore Foundation to see how we can have stronger diversity at events. We have Pi Data logistic committees all over the world who are working to organize these events, as well as our incredible project leads who work very closely with us. So Andy, we've got a little bit of time left. I think Andy's going to talk a little bit more about our corporate, a little bit about our corporate partnership program and how that works.
Yeah, so I think a lot of folks, if you have an employer, you could find out how they give money, how they give back to all of all right, it went away. So if you have an employer and you want to give back to the community, I think we have lots of ways for people to come to us, and probably one of the sweet spots we have at being a 501c3 is that corporations can give us money to give directly to the projects, and it's really only about 10% typically overhead that goes to NumFOCUS, and the rest goes to helping the projects and how the projects determine to spend the money. Whereas a lot of times if you try to give through university or through other means, it'll be a much higher overhead to actually get to the projects. Now, a lot of projects work through universities, and they have to pay their university overheads too. And so we do encourage, if you're in a university working to get grants, and we can help you get grants and be a partner, and bringing on corporate partners, we actually can help a lot with those pieces as well. And so we have different levels of corporate partnership that can participate in our events, they can participate in our advisory board, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that really helps us out is just giving us connections to people who actually want to help build the entire ecosystem and believe the sustainability of the things that are building their companies is important, as so many folks have done thus far. And so with that, I think we might have 5 minutes for questioning and answer anything that people might have.
So I know you support a lot of open source software projects, and I was wondering if you support projects that are in those other sort of verticals you talked about, like community or legal help or whatever, like having a collaborator on like a conference or something like that. Is that something that's part of the NumFOCUS mission, or is it primarily sponsoring software development?
So for example, events. We definitely pay for a lot of event type pieces. And so the projects are kind of where we focus. because they're the ones that like we believe are making the tools that are helping folks. Now, those projects often like work with, like, for example, Girls Who Code was an organization we work with, and just other like different folks who come to us who are just like, well, we'll figure out how to get something, but it always has to come back to scientific software somehow. And we're pretty open to whatever we can do there. I don't know if that answers your complete question, but also we'll pay for, like, a lot of times it's legal services. Like, there's a lot of legal questions that come up. I've read way too many documents about the BSD plus patents clause, right? And so things like this. So like often my job is to like go talk to the lawyers and try to help them interpret it, and sometimes that means bringing in other people. I think, for example, on our sustainability board, we have like the big big data.
South Big Data Hub.
Is it Big South Big Data Hub or big? Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
South Big Data.
But and so like there's organizations that are a little bit more focused at diversity in technology in general, rather than just specifically scientific software. So.
So do you have people volunteering for you to do data science type work? Is that how it works, or how are the projects coming together?
Do you?
Yeah,
okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so we have, we don't have a team of NumFOCUS data scientists. You know, we don't have a data science or an engineering department that is part of NumFOCUS. But what we do have, we have independent contractor agreements with many people that are working as developers for the project. So one of our fiscally sponsored projects can say they have a grant, and for a portion of that grant money they would like to use to pay a developer, whether it's in the U.S. or whether it's, you know, in another country. So we have a independent contractor agreement with that person, sign that, and then NumFOCUS pays them. Any other questions, comments?
A little bit curious. I've been myself getting involved in an open source project because I've spent most of my career in an industry which is very based upon intellectual property. Do you guys have any sort of like stories or even kind of like advice about how to approach opening source in some sort of topic in which you worry a little bit about the ramifications of just having someone say that they own an intellectual property?
Yeah, we've been asked that twice today.
Yeah, just today.
I think it's that New York City is a little bit more concerned about this than Austin, Texas. Yeah, so I mean, I don't have like specific legal advice. I would, you know, every case has a little bit different flair to it, and especially in New York, where there's been open source contributors been locked up and put in jail for contributing back to open source. And so it is kind of a back and forth of what does that mean. I think fundamentally you need to work with the company who you're working with and help them understand how giving back to the community does sustain the rest of the things they're doing. I think every financial institution, like even the city of Boston was here talking about how they use all our tools to prop them up. And if they didn't have those tools, they couldn't respond to like the 311 calls, or maybe the ticker bids nearly as quickly. And coming and making that case and working with the legal team. And if it is the case, the legal team gives you a hard time, or they say, oh, we have all these rules, well, then you can send it to us and we can try to find the right person who can help answer some of those questions. But in general, you kind of have to work with your company, and sometimes that's too hard, or maybe there's a willingness, and you just need someone to come in and like pitch it or something like that. And we've done that before and help prepare presentations for folks who want to give back and whatnot. But there's a lot of different solutions people have taken, and sometimes it's even as much as like moving out of one company and giving money through a corporate donation and things like that. And so it's a tricky issue. So
Travis?
Someone has ideas about helping with sustainability. How would they participate? How would they connect with the right people? Would they, I think there's a sustainability conference coming up or summit coming up. So if there's somebody who has ideas about how to do that or wants to talk about it, what would it be?
Yeah, we would love input and ideas about sustainability. And thanks for asking that, because we didn't really give anyone a call to action or what you can do if you have ideas. So our projects director would probably be the best person, because she's heading up our sustainability efforts, to talk to about that. So to reach out to Christy. So you can info@numfocus.org. You can reach that, that comes to all the staff. So, and the correct person will grab that. We also have our emails, our first names, at numfocus.org. So you could do Christy@numfocus.org and, talk one-on-one with her about sustainability. Also, if you have ideas or you want to have conversations with us, we're more than happy to set up a call and talk to you about your ideas and see if they can be implemented, or if there's some other format or some other way we can make sure the right person knows about them.
All right, thank you, everyone. I believe the next talk is coming in.
Thank you.